All right, everybody. Today we are going to do a matting demo for Photo 1. And the first thing we're going to have, obviously, is going to be our 11 by 14 print. This is the one that I'm going to be working with today. Next thing we need to have is a ruler. It needs to be at least 40 inches long, because if you recall from the lectures previously, the mat board that we are using is 32 by 40 inches long. So this is 40 inches down this edge, 32 inches down this edge, right? The next thing we're going to have are going to be our two cutters. This cutter right here is our straight cutter, and this is called our bevel cutter. We'll explain those more when we get further into the process. We are also going to need Logan 270 matting blades, which are what are in this box. We're going to need some tape. And last but not least, we are going to need our mat cutter, which is what this is right over here. There's a bar that opens up and a backing rod that we're going to just go ahead and remove now and get it out of our way. The first thing on the agenda is going to be cutting down the board into 16 by 20 pieces. Now we're going to work on the back side of the board. You'll notice if you look at your mat board, there's a front side that should be nice, pristine, and clean. No marks on it, no writing on it whatsoever. And it generally will have a different surface to it, or a tooth as we call it. On the back side of our board, we'll have a different tooth. It's generally a matte finish, and we'll almost always have some kind of writing on it descriptive from the manufacturer itself, as I do here. The first thing I always do when I'm getting ready to cut down a board is I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to mark a corner with a 0 and a slash that goes through it. This allows me to measure from the same point every time, so I get 4 pieces that are all the exact same size. We're going to lay the ruler down on the table, and we know that this is our 40-inch edge. So I'm going to put the ruler at 20 inches coming off of my 0 point, and I'm going to mark it right here. So that's half, right? On the other side of the mat board, I'm going to do the same thing coming from the same side, right? 20 inches. It's going to come all the way out, mark that one at center also. Then, on the short edge, coming from that same 0 corner, once again, we're going to come out to 16, because that's half of 32. You'll notice I'm always laying my ruler on the table, not on the mat board. And then I'm bringing it to the edge of the mat board so that I always get a nice straight measurement. 16 from this corner coming out. I'm going to mark that there. Now with a very light touch with my pencil, I'm going to connect all 4 of those dots. Like so. Then I'm going to do it longwise. So now I have 4 pieces of board that are exact same size. Now we're going to bring our mat cutter in. Move the piece of scrap mat board. I'm going to slide the board underneath the arm. Bring the arm down so it lines up with our line. On the part of the mat board that's that's closest to me, there is a stop. We call that a fence. And that's going to stop the board as we pull our cutter across. For this cut, we're going to use our straight cutter. We want to put a brand new fresh blade in it. Each blade is good for about 7 to 10 cuts, and you can use both sides of the blade. To remove the blade, we're going to remove the nut, carefully place it to the side. Do not drop it on the floor, they are hard to see. Take the blade out. And get a fresh blade out of the pack. These are razor blades. Please be mindful and careful. They are very sharp. We're going to place the blade into the cutter like so. You'll notice that there are 3 detents on the cutter. We're going to use the detent that's in the sitter for cutting 4-ply mat board. Line the plate back up, put the pin back in, screw it into place. Next what we're going to do is we're going to take the cutter, and on this arm there's a track. The cutter is going to sit into the track, so the blade goes into the slot inside the cutter rides in the track, and that makes it completely square. Placing pressure down on the arm, we're going to pull the blade towards us. One nice smooth gesture, stepping off to the side of the cutter, so when I pull the blade out, we do not strike ourselves in the leg. Now we've cut the board into 2 pieces. We're going to take that piece, flip it sideways, line the arm up again, hold it against the fence, place the cutter in the track with the blade going into the divot. One nice smooth motion pulling towards yourself. We now have 2 pieces of board to 16 by 20. We're going to do the same thing with the other piece. Line it all up nice and square. Now we have a front and a back. These 2 pieces will be used for the next print, so we're just going to set them aside. Okay, now that we've got our boards cut down, we're going to take one of them and set it aside, because that's going to be our backer board, and we're not going to need that to be able to cut the window for the image to come through. So, first thing we're going to do, it's kind of the same thing we did with the whole big board. We know that this board should be 16 by 20, right? So, same thing, we're going to mark a corner, measure from that corner out. Half of 16 is 8 inches. Then on this side, half of 16 is again 8 inches. We're going to make a mark right there. On the long side of the board, coming from the same corner we started from before, we know that half of 20 is 10 inches. And half of 20 again is 10 inches. Just like we did with the large board, we're going to connect all these dots and make a very nice light line. The reason I keep saying make a nice light line is because we're going to come back and erase all of those lines. We make them really dark, they're going to be hard to erase. So now we have a 16 by 20 board quartered, so we know where the exact center of the board is, right? Now comes the fun part. We're going to grab our image, and what we need to do is measure the image window, right? The window is the space that we're going to be viewing the image through. So it wants to be no bigger than the image itself. Now here you have some choices you can make. You can choose to mat the image all the way out and show your full frame line, or you can choose to mat the image right to the edge of the image. Your choice, you just have to be consistent with it. You have to do them all the same, okay? So for me, when I printed this image, I did not use a full frame line, so I'm going to I'm going to mat right to the edge of my window. I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to measure the opposite side. And what I do when I measure a window is I actually use metric, because I find it easier to divide by 2 than to deal with fractions. So with this one right here, it is 302 millimeters. So on a scrap sheet of paper, I'm gonna write 302 millimeters. Half of that is what? 151 millimeters, right? So on my long edge, because I'm measuring the long edge of the image, I'm gonna do 151 millimeters from the center point out and make a tick mark. 151 millimeters out from the center mark and make a tick mark. On the opposite side of my board, I'm going to do that again, 151 millimeters. Right about there. Make a tick mark. Go in the opposite direction coming from center, 151 millimeters. So now I'm going to connect those 4 dots. Take your time, be precise, make sure you get it right the first time. As every good carpenter will tell you, measure twice, cut once. Saves time and saves material. All right, so that's the long edge. Now we need to measure the short edge. And that's going to be 225 millimeters. I'm going to write that down on my scrap paper. Half of 225 millimeters, 225 millimeters divided by 2, 112.5 millimeters. So for my center line, 112.5 millimeters. 112, make a nice tick mark. From center out the other direction, 112.5. And the other direction, 112.5. The other direction, 112.5. Now we're going to connect those. Another nice faint line. So now, we've got this big tic-tac-toe pattern. Not really. What we have is a rectangle in the center of our board that should, if we've done our math right, be the same size as the image. The easiest way to check that, place the image flat on the table. Pardon me. Take your math board, lay it on top of the image. Your lines should line up with the edges of the image on the long edge, and your lines should line up with the edges of the image on the short edge. That way we verified that this window in here is the part that's going to get cut out, and it's the same size as our image. So now we're going to take our image, set it aside. We're going to bring in our mat board cutter. And for this, we're going to be using our bevel cutter. Now, I mentioned this earlier. This has a knife blade inside of it, so be careful. When you press down on this silver part, the blade comes out through here, and that's what cuts the mat board. To remove the blade, there's a set screw on the back side. Gently unscrew that, and the cutter will pop all the way up. Undo this set screw, and the blade will slide out. This blade has only been used once. I can only see a divot in one corner. That means I can take the blade, flip it around, slide it back up into the receiver, lock that down with the knob, Push the cutter in. Make sure your finger's not down below here, because if it is, you're going to cut it. Tighten the set screw back up again. And now the cutter is ready to be used. Just like the straight cutter, this cutter is going to sit into the track on the mat board cutter itself and slide in it. When we go to make a cut, we're going to push down on this piece here and drag it towards us, right? Now, when we're making cuts with a 45-degree bevel cut, which is what this guy is, we're going to use a piece of scrap mat board. We'll place it inside the mat cutter first. What that's going to do is make sure that our cut is completely accurate and we don't dive the cutter into the mat cutter itself, causing the blade to get dulled. When we make a mat cut for the window, the excess window material always wants to be on this side of the cutter. That way the bevel is going in at the right direction. Just like before, we bring the arm down, line it up with our line that we've made, press down on the arm to hold the board in place. On the bevel cutter itself, we have a little white tick mark right here. You see that? That white tick mark is our start point. So we're going to put that in the track, line it up with our line that we've made. So our tick mark is right there. Hold everything in place. So I'm pushing pressure down on the arm to hold the board in place. I'm going to take the cutter itself and I'm going to dive that blade down into the board. It takes a little bit of pressure. Once it's in, I'm going to drag that towards me nice and gentle. When my line comes to my next tick mark, I'm going to stop. Let the blade retract, pull it out, set it aside. Take your board, rotate it 90 degrees. Repeat the process on the next line. Put the cutter in the track, line up our tick mark, plunge the blade into the board, drag it towards ourselves, stop at the next line. You'll notice, out of a degree of safety, I still step out of the way of the mat board cutter as I pull the cutter to me, just in case. Rotate your board another 90 degrees, line it up again, push down on the arm, line up your tick mark, hold everything in place, dive the blade into the board, bring it in, and stop at your next line. One more cut to go. On this one, be careful how much you pick up the board. We don't want it to rip because all three sides are already cut. Rotate it around to your last cut. One more, put it in the track, line it up with the mark, dive the blade, hold pressure in it the whole way, bring it to you. When it comes to the next line, stop. Let the bar pick up. Then when we pick it up and lift it away, we have a window. This is now scrap. We can set it aside. We're done with the cutter. We can set that aside. Now comes the test. We retrieve our image. Set it on top. And voila, we have a window that fits our image. So now we need to mount everything in place. I'm going to flip my mat board window back upside down again. I'm going to retrieve my backer board that we set aside. And I'm going to line these two up. Since this is a portrait orientation image, the hinge for my backer board needs to be on the top. If it was a landscape image, the hinge would be on this side, right? It always wants to be on the top so that when we present them, the hinge would be up here for portrait, the hinge would be up here for landscape. Line the two up. I'm going to take our tape. And I'm going to use a piece of tape that is exactly just shy of the width of the mat board. Then I'm going to cut 2 more pieces of tape that are going to go that way. And this, just like everything else, presentation is crucial. Make sure your tape cuts are clean. Make sure they're straight. We don't want to hide anything underneath the mat that we don't want the viewer to see. It's called hiding your sin, and we're not going to do that. So I've got 2 short pieces cut. They're both going to go here. I've got 1 long piece cut. It's going to go here. But before I put any tape down, I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to erase all of my lines. Because if we want somebody to really see the work that we've done, they're going to lift open the mat. And when they lift open the mat, if they see all of our work laying this out, it's going to detract from the image, which is the last thing that we want. I am using a white eraser because if you use an orange one or the one on the bottom of your regular pencil, it will leave orange marks. And we don't want that. We want it to look nice and clean. And a couple more to go. Oh, my eraser broke. All right, now that that's all there. All right, now that all of my marks are gone, I'm going to take my tape. Now my tape is different than your tape. You're going to use the masking tape that's in the lab, which is not ideal, but it is free for you. This is actually archival linen tape. So it is a peel and stick backing and it's made of linen. So it's 100% archival. So in 100 years, if somebody opens up this print, the tape is not going to just shatter and disintegrate like the masking tape will. However, you do have to special order it, and it is not cheap. So we don't require you guys to use it. But do know that the masking tape that you are using is not ideal, and that this is the proper material. So it's an artist's linen tape is what it's called. We're going to follow a nice straight line. So there's 2 perpendicular and the one that's parallel that goes across the entire seam, which creates a hinge. All right. So next, we have to mount this image to the backer board and have it sit in the middle of the frame. So the first thing to do is to set it into the window, close the window up, and then very gently with clean hands, set the image into the right position so you do not see anything around the edges that you do not intend the viewer to see. At this point, I take something clean. I usually use my tape box, set it on top of the image so the image does not move. And now we're going to gently open the window back up. Then we're going to build photo corners. To make photo corners, we're going to need just a regular sheet of copier paper. If you're doing this 100% archival, you would want to use some kind of resume paper that is archival also. So I'm going to do a strip that's about 1.5 inches wide, lengthwise down the paper. All right, so now we're going to take that strip. We're going to take it over and we're going to fold it over to make a triangle, like so. Then we're going to take the tail and bring it back this way. All right? Then we're going to cut that piece off. Now we have a pocket. We're going to gently lift the corner of our print. Slide that in there and see how that just holds the print in place. We are going to put tape on it, but first we need to make the other 2. So again, take the corner of the paper, flip it over to make a triangle. Take the tail, Flip it over this way to make another triangle. Cut it off. And this one, again, hold the print in place. Put the photo quarter in, let it sit down. Now we're going to make one more. Take the triangle, fold it over. Take the tail, fold it over. And cut off the tail. Gently lift the corner on the top of your image. Slide that into position. Now I only did 3 corners, right? The reason we only do 3 corners is because we do want this print to be able to breathe once it's inside the mat. So here in lovely Florida, we have lots of humidity. So things expand and contract with that humidity. As they do, they need to shift. If we were to put a corner on all 4 corners, we would trap that print and it would start to buckle. Then that would look not good. So we are going to only do 3. Always do the bottom 2 and do the top ones. So now we're going to take our tape and we're just going to come across the photo corner. The tape in no way actually contacts the print. It just sits on the paper. That way, if we had to, we could remove this print from this mat board and put it into another one if it got damaged. And tape piece number 2. Number 3. Now we can close the print. And voila, we have a print ready for display. So ladies and gentlemen, that's how we do matting. If you have any questions, I am always available. Just send me an email or give me a call. All right, have a good day. See you soon. Bye.